It was the wedding everyone in Lusaka talked about. A perfect sunny day, flowers everywhere, and a bride and groom who looked like they were straight out of a magazine. Zanil wore a white gown that shimmered in the light, and Chisomo stood tall in his tailored suit. When they said their vows, people cried. "They're soulmates," someone whispered. "A match made in heaven." But no one knew what was waiting behind those pretty photos and sweet words. From the outside, everything looked perfect. They moved into a beautiful house, smiled in church, and even hosted dinner parties. But inside the walls of their home, Zanil was slowly becoming invisible. Chisomo controlled every cent. If she needed money, she had to ask, sometimes even beg. He told her what she could buy, what she couldn't wear, and where she could go. At first, she thought it was just being a man or taking care of her. But over time, the truth hit her harder each day. She had no say in anything. Zanil had big dreams once. She loved to create things with her hands, to design, to imagine. But those dreams were pushed aside for cooking, cleaning, and keeping up appearances. Chisomo made fun of her ideas. "Who'd buy your silly beads?" he once laughed. Still, she stayed quiet, holding on to the hope that maybe love would change him. But deep down, she felt it. This wasn't love. This was control. And she was slowly being erased. But not for long. Zanil knew she couldn't live in silence forever. Every time Chisomo laughed at her cooking or called her just a housewife, something inside her broke a little more. But she never shouted, never argued. She just smiled, nodded, and planned. While he slept or watched TV, she sat in the corner of their bedroom, making bracelets and necklaces with her hand. She had always loved creating beautiful things. It gave her peace, a sense of purpose. Slowly, quietly, she began to build something of her own. She called it Zaza Creations, a name that felt like hers but still kept her identity safe. She knew Chisomo would never take her seriously, and if he found out, he might even destroy it all. So she kept it secret. She would tell him she was visiting her aunt or attending a women's prayer group, and then sneak off with her small black bag full of handmade jewelry. In the evening markets of Lusaka, surrounded by bright lights, music, and the smell of roasted maize, Zanil came alive. She stood behind her tiny table, selling her work to strangers. Some nights she made very little. Other nights, she went home with pockets full of folded cash. Her first customer had said, "These are beautiful. You made these yourself." Zanil had nodded, her eyes welling up. That moment changed everything. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Every coin she earned, she saved. No spending, no showing off. She wasn't building this to impress anyone. She was building it to survive, to breathe, to exist again. She bought better tools, nicer beads. She designed business cards and even printed a small banner. No one around her knew that the quiet woman with sad eyes was slowly turning into a businesswoman. Not even Chisomo. Especially not him. He still laughed at her, still threw insults across the table like knives. But now Zanil didn't cry as much. She didn't feel as small. Because at night, while the city slept and her husband snored in front of the TV, she was out there, under the stars, selling her dreams one bracelet at a time. She wasn't just a housewife anymore. She was becoming a hustler, a silent storm. And her time was coming. It started with late nights. Missed calls. The smell of perfume that wasn't hers. Zanil knew something had changed. Chisomo no longer hid it. Soon, he was walking around Lusaka with another woman on his arm. Her name was Naledi. She was loud, beautiful, flashy, and dressed like the city itself, bright, bold, and proud. Wherever they went, people stared. And Zanil? She heard the whispers. At church. At the market. Even in her own neighborhood. "She's the wife, but that one is the girlfriend," someone said once, not knowing Zanil was right behind them. She heard it all. She felt it all. But she never reacted. No shouting. No begging. No tears in public. She kept her head high, even when her heart was sinking. Chisomo didn't care. He drove around with Naledi in the car Zanil used to clean. He took her to restaurants Zanil only saw in magazines. He laughed louder, smiled bigger, and when Zanil asked about it, he shrugged. "She makes me happy," he said coldly, as if Zanil was just a piece of old furniture taking up space. It hurt, more than words could explain. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why she wasn't enough. Was it her cooking? Her quietness? Her dreams he never understood? But every time those dark thoughts came, she reminded herself, "He may have taken my love, my dignity, even my name in public, but he will never take my mind, my strength, my future." So she kept going, kept creating. Every bracelet she made carried her pain. Every necklace held a piece of her silence. But that silence wasn't weakness, it was power. While Chisomo danced in clubs with Naledi, Zanil was working, growing, saving, becoming. And though she smiled less in public, her eyes held something new. A kind of fire that didn't need to be loud. People began to notice. "She's changed," someone whispered, but they didn't know why. Zanil never confronted Naledi, never fought for Chisomo's love. She didn't need to, because deep down, she had already started letting go. And what he didn't realize was this. While he paraded shame, she was building an empire. Quietly, strongly, on her own terms. Zanil had learned something important. When no one protects you, you must protect yourself. After months of selling her jewelry at the market, saving every coin, and pretending everything was normal at home, she made her boldest move yet. She opened her first secret bank account. Not in her name, but under her business alias, Zaza Creations. A name that Chisomo didn't even know existed. She didn't stop at one. She opened 2 more accounts, each in a different province. One in Lusaka, another in Ndola, and a third in Chipata. It wasn't just for safety, it was her escape plan. If one account was ever found, the others would keep her dreams alive. Every kwacha she made from her sales went straight into those accounts. Not a single coin was wasted. No shopping sprees. No flashy hair or new phones. Just quiet growth. Quiet power. At home, she wore fake smiles like makeup. She cooked. She cleaned. She listened to Chisomo brag about his nights out with Nality. She laughed when he expected her to laugh. She stayed silent when he insulted her. But behind that silence was a woman planting seeds. A woman preparing for a future only she could see. Some days it felt heavy. Carrying secrets. Living 2 lives. But Zanil had a goal, and that goal kept her going. She started tracking her earnings, keeping records, learning about investments from YouTube videos late at night. She even met a female banker at the market one day who gave her tips on saving, growing, and protecting her business. No one, not Chisomo, not Nality, not even her neighbors, had any idea what was happening behind her quiet eyes. She was no longer just making jewelry. She was building a system, a future, a way out. And the most powerful part? She never had to shout about it. She didn't post it online. She didn't tell her friends. She didn't even hint at it in her journals. Everything stayed in her heart, and in those secret accounts that now held more than just money, they held proof that she was not powerless. Zanil's smile at dinner was fake. But her plan? Very real, and very close to ready. It was a normal morning, or at least it started that way. The sun was rising over Lusaka, the kettle whistled softly, and Zanil stood at the stove making toast, just like she did every day. The bread burned a little, but she didn't care. Her mind was far away, thinking about the new shipment of beads she was expecting, and a big order from a customer in Ndola. Then she heard the sound, papers sliding across the table. She turned around slowly. Chisomo sat there with his usual smug face, sipping his tea like a king. "Sign those," he said casually, without even looking up. "You're free to go now. Don't worry, I've already moved on." Then he laughed, a deep, cruel laugh that filled the kitchen like smoke. "You leave with nothing, just like you came." Zanil didn't say a word. She looked at the papers. Neat, clean, so sure of himself. He really believed he was winning, that he had crushed her, that she would cry, beg, scream. But she didn't. She simply nodded, her face calm, too calm. Chisomo raised an eyebrow. "No fight? No tears?" he asked. She shook her head, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat down across from him like it was just another morning. But inside her, something was shifting. She wasn't scared. She wasn't angry. She was ready. Because what Chisomo didn't know, what he could never even imagine, was that Zanil had already let go of him a long time ago. This paper didn't break her. It freed her. She took a sip of her tea, warm and steady, while he continued to talk about how she would walk out with 0 kwacha and 0 respect. But every word he spoke only made her stronger. He thought he was in control. But Zanil had been preparing for this day in silence, stacking coins, opening accounts, registering her business, buying land, and building a future that didn't include him. So she smiled softly, picked up the pen, and said, "All right. No fear. No drama. Just peace." He thought she was weak. He had no idea she was about to flip the story. And the burnt toast? She ate it quietly, knowing it would be the last meal she ever made for a man who never saw her worth. The day of the court hearing finally came. The Kitwe family court was packed. Family, friends, a few curious faces, and of course, Nality sitting confidently in the gallery, dressed in bright colors like she was attending a fashion show. Chisomo walked in like a king, suit perfectly pressed, flashing his usual arrogant smile. He even winked at Nality before sitting down. In his mind, this was already won. To him, Zanil was just a shadow from his past. Nothing more. Zanil walked in quietly. No makeup, no big entrance. Just a calm face and a small file in her hand. She sat down without looking around. While everyone else whispered and stared, she stayed focused. This was not about attention. It was about truth. The judge asked the usual questions: how long they'd been married, the reason for divorce, and whether there were any shared assets. Chisomo leaned forward and spoke first. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "there's nothing. She came with nothing, and she leaves with nothing. Laughter echoed from his side of the room. Even Nality smirked. Then the judge turned to Zanil. "Madam, do you have anything to say?" She stood slowly, took a deep breath, and reached into her file. "Yes, Your Honor," she said clearly. Her voice didn't shake. She began placing documents on the table one by one. Business registration, trademark certificates, property titles, stock investment records, bank account statements, all in her legal name. All clean, all real. The room went silent. Even the air felt heavier. Chisomo's smirk faded. He leaned forward, confused, his eyes scanning the documents as if he was seeing Zanil for the first time. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Chikondi, these are impressive," he said, flipping through the pages. Zanil simply nodded. "Everything was built after marriage, Your Honor, with my own hands, and all income from Zaza Creations went into these investments. No yelling, no drama, just facts." Chisomo turned pale. Nality looked down, suddenly very interested in her nails. Zanil had spoken last, but her words were the only ones that mattered. In that moment, she wasn't just a quiet wife. She was a businesswoman, a planner, and a storm that no one saw coming. The courtroom had never been so quiet, and the story had never been so clear. The judge flipped through the documents slowly, page by page, making sure every word was clear. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the ceiling fan humming. Chisomo sat frozen, no longer smiling. His hands fidgeted on his lap. Nality glanced at him, clearly confused. This wasn't the story they had expected. What shocked everyone the most wasn't just that Zanil had money. It was how smartly everything was done. Her business, Zaza Creations, wasn't some small side hustle like Chisomo had once joked about. It was a fully registered, legally recognized company, trademarked under her full name, Zanil Chikondi. The logo, the brand, the bank accounts, everything pointed back to her. And then came the properties, one in Dola, another in Kabwe, a third one just outside Lusaka. All purchased through her business income, all paid in full, and all listed under her legal identity. The paperwork was perfect, clean, professional, and undeniable. Chisomo's face changed color. He kept blinking like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. This was the same woman he called useless. The same woman he told to stay in the kitchen. The same woman he left for a flashier life. And now she was standing in front of a judge, presenting a portfolio that even some businessmen would envy. Stocks, land, a growing company, all managed in silence. Zanil didn't gloat. She didn't look at him. She stood with calm dignity, her hands folded, letting her paperwork speak. The judge looked up and asked her, "You managed all this on your own?" She nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor. I built it quietly while raising myself again." The courtroom stayed still. Chisomo shifted in his seat, sweat forming on his forehead. He finally realized what had happened. While he was showing off his new life, Zanil was securing her. This wasn't revenge. This was preparation. This was proof that silence is not weakness, and that some women don't scream when they're hurt. They build, they protect, they rise. And now the truth was right there on paper, signed, sealed, and fully legal. Zaza Creations didn't belong to him. It never did. It belonged to Zanil, and she was done being anyone's secret. The judge leaned back in his chair, took one final look at the documents, then looked directly at Chisomo. His voice was calm but firm. "Sir, you own nothing." The words dropped like thunder in the courtroom. A loud gasp swept across the room. Even people in the back, who thought they were just there for drama, sat up straight. Chisomo's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. For the first time, the man who always had something to say, who always laughed the loudest, was completely speechless. The judge continued. "All assets, including the registered business Zaza Creations, the listed properties, and financial investments, legally remain with the petitioner, Mrs. Zanil Chikondi." Then he lifted the gavel and brought it down. Bang. Just like that, it was final. Zanil didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just closed her file, stood up, and nodded politely to the court. Her silence was more powerful than any celebration. Because she hadn't come for revenge, she came for her freedom. Chisomo sat there frozen, still trying to process what just happened. He thought he could throw her away and walk off with everything. He thought she was weak, that she'd leave with nothing. But now he was the one left empty-handed. Nality, who had spent the entire hearing twisting her hair and checking her nails, now looked deeply uncomfortable. She didn't even look at Chisomo as she grabbed her purse and stood up. Without a word, she walked out of the courtroom, leaving him alone, embarrassed and exposed. People whispered as Zanil passed by them. Some were shocked, some looked inspired, but no one dared to say anything out loud. They had just seen something rare, a woman who had been dismissed, underestimated, and mocked, rise like a queen in front of everyone. Zanil walked with steady steps. No rush, no pride, just peace. Behind her, Chisomo was still sitting in the same chair, staring into nothing. He had lost everything, not just the money, the business, the properties, but his image, his pride, his power. Zaniel didn't have to take anything from him. He gave it all away the moment he chose ego over respect. And now the world knew. The quiet wife had become the quiet storm. Zaniel walked out of the courtroom with her head high, not a tear in sight. No shaking hands, no dramatic exit, just quiet power in every step. She didn't just win a divorce. She won back something much deeper. She had reclaimed her dignity, her voice, her name. And everyone could feel it. As the courtroom doors opened, a few photographers waiting outside began snapping pictures. The flashes lit up her face, but she didn't flinch. She was dressed in a black and gold power suit, tailored to perfection. It was a custom piece from her own Zaza Creations collection, designed by her for this very moment. Gold cuffs, black heels, simple earrings, strong, elegant, unstoppable. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and her face held no bitterness. Only peace. People on the steps whispered, "That's her. She's the wife. She looks like a boss." And she did. Behind her, the man who tried to break her was still inside, sitting in silence. But Zaniel didn't look back. Not even once. She wasn't walking away from a man. She was walking into her future. News spread fast. Photos from the courthouse appeared on social media within minutes. Zaza Creations founder wins court battle in silence. The wife everyone underestimated. Her inbox filled with messages, some from women she didn't even know, thanking her for being brave, for showing them what was possible. But Zaniel hadn't done it for fame. She did it to survive, to grow, to heal. And now, her story was doing more than just turning heads. It was changing lives. She paused at the bottom of the court steps, took a deep breath, and smiled for the first time that day. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had finally taken her power back. No one saw her tears when she was hurting. No one noticed her late nights at the market. But now the world was seeing what silence can build. Zaniel didn't need to raise her voice. Her walk said it all. She had been the wife in the background. Now she was the woman in charge. Today, Zaniel is no longer just a name whispered in markets or courtrooms. She's a symbol of strength across Malawi and Zambia. The same woman who once sat in silence at her kitchen table, hurt and helpless, now stands in front of packed rooms full of women, teaching them how to take back their power through business and financial independence. She runs workshops under the Zaza Creations Foundation, where she shares not only her skills in design and entrepreneurship, but also the lessons life forced her to learn. Women travel from small villages and big cities just to hear her speak. Some come with broken hearts, others with broken bank accounts. But they leave with notebooks full of plans, eyes full of hope, and a fire in their souls. Her story, she doesn't scream it. She tells it, calmly, clearly, powerfully. And every time she shares how she rose from being a controlled, forgotten wife to a self-made millionaire, the room goes quiet. People listen, not just because of what she says, but how she says it. Her motto is simple: don't scream, build in silence. It came from her own journey, when no one listened to her cries, so she chose to build instead. Now she's helping other women do the same, opening bank accounts, starting businesses, investing wisely, and never waiting to be given permission. Zaniel is proof that quiet women are not weak. They are strategic. They are focused. And when they rise for many. She was once broken. Now she builds others.